All right, today we are going to discuss the last few research methods in psychology. So we ended with the survey method, which deals with individuals surveying people to get information. I talked to you about voting. Elections is a great time for you to actually witness people surveying people because they want to know what public opinion is concerning elections. The next thing that we're going to discuss is a case study. All of you guys are already very familiar with the case study. The description is that it's an in-depth investigation of an individual or small group of individuals. So the first thing that you need to look at are the key elements of a case study. You need images, screenshots, captions, like personal quotes from the people, specific information, and it's pretty much an individual and unique study of somebody. I always think of the real world as an example or intervention because it follows people around in their everyday surroundings. The advantage is that it provides like information in specific cases, how somebody lives, maybe with a mental disorder or drug addiction, things like that. Disadvantage, though, is that there are isolated circumstances. Every individual comes into this world and they are different. And so when you look at a case study, it might be amazing to study a certain individual, but we have to remember that we cannot generalize their life and compare it to other people. Also, if you ask somebody about their childhood or their previous life experiences, with age and time, stories can be distorted. They may even think that people who they believed were in the situation may not have been there. I'm in my 20s, and if you ask me about my 4th birthday party, I'm sure that I can give you some details, but it's probably way more vague than if you asked one of my parents who were there. The next study is going to be the longitudinal. The root word is long, which means that a group of participants are observed at intervals of an extended period of time throughout their life. So I know I talked to a student the other day who was discussing the new documentary called Boyhood, where they researched these boys from a young age up to a certain age. So a longitudinal study would be if we study the development of females from birth, 5 years old, 10, and then to puberty. That's a longitudinal study because it occurs over an extended period of time. They're observed, but it's an interval, so it's not that we consistently watch them, but maybe we check in periodically or throughout intervals of their life. When we talk about advantages, it enables researchers to see how individuals change over time and evolve. The only thing is that there's disadvantages, and it's time-consuming. If you're going to study someone at puberty, you have to wait until they reach puberty. It can be expensive, and also with ethical guidelines that we've learned about in class, participants may not be available for the duration of the study, or they may not want to participate after they get to a certain age. When we talk about a cross-sectional study, it's going to be researchers compare the differences and similarities among people in different age groups at a given time. Let me give you an example here. If we study the ability for males to sprint in a 40-meter race, and you take 10-year-old males, 20-year-old males, 30, 40, and 50-year-old males, you are comparing differences and similarities amongst these men at the different ages. Now, you're not dealing with the same person at these ages like the longitudinal. You're taking a group of 10-year-olds, a group of 20-year-olds, a group of 30-year-olds, and comparing the data of the age groups at the given time frame in their life. When we talk about advantages, it's less time consuming than longitudinal because remember, if you want to study somebody at puberty, you got to wait till they get there. Here's the disadvantage though. You may run into outliers with data that occurs with the cross-sectional study because everyone is different. You may have that 50-year-old man that can run just as fast and sprint just as quickly as a 20-year-old male, which will alter your data. Differences between members of the sample cannot necessarily be attributed to age and development. You can't generalize this type of experiment. You can to an extent, but then you have unique features of every individual that you are studying. Naturalistic observations are awesome because you actually get to observe the behavior of the people or animals in their natural habitat. The only thing that is an issue with naturalistic observation is that researchers have no control over the setting or events that occur, and usually the naturalistic observation describes what is happening. It does not necessarily address what is behind, or it does not explain the mental processes that go into what is naturally being observed. Naturalistic observation leans more towards a behavioralist perspective. The advantages enables research to witness the behavior of people and animals in the settings that are not artificial, which a laboratory would be artificial. Results can be generalized more easily than those in lab studies. And of course, we're going to talk about the laboratory observation, and its participants are observed in a laboratory setting. If you have ever participated in a sleep study like this man right here, or been to a clinic or a lab, that is a laboratory observation. Some advantages are that it enables researchers to precisely control certain aspects of the study. Like, they're completely in control of the situation with the people and how they're involved because they control the setting. The disadvantage is that laboratories cannot duplicate real-life environments. Like, some people have reported having a struggle with their sleep cycle or even participating in a sleep study due to the laboratory setting not being like home. When we talk about a correlational study, it allows researchers to work with archival, demographic, or other pre-existing data. If you can look right there, there's some correlations: positive, negative, no correlation. Here's some advantages. It allows for quantitative analysis of relationships between some variables. So pretty much what a correlational study does is say, here are two variables, variable 1, variable 2, and there could potentially be a relationship between the two. Now, the disadvantage is that researchers have no control of some extraneous variables like outliers that are farther out on the spectrum. Also, it cannot determine the order of occurrences, and it does not and cannot interfere with cause and effect. Correlation is not cause and effect. It's just saying, hey, these two might have some type of relationship. Correlation is not saying, if I do this, then this will happen. That is completely the opposite. When we discuss experimentational method or the experimental method, it allows research to manipulate one variable and measure changes in another. One will stay constant and one will change, and then they will compare the data. So when you are performing an experiment, you have to remember that the advantages is that it allows for some control over the variables. Usually you're able to infer cause and effect from experiment. If I do this, then this will happen, or this is the result. Okay, my theory is this will happen when I do this. Disadvantages is that it's difficult in replicating real life events. Sometimes it's difficult to generalize results as well. You have two terms that you need to be very familiar with, which is the independent variable. It's the variable being manipulated, in order to test its effects, and the dependent variable is precisely what it is. It's dependent on the independent variable. So the dependent variable is the variable that is actually being measured. The independent variable influences the change in the dependent variable. When we talk about the experimental method, the experimental group will be the group receiving a treatment in the experiment, whereas the control group will be the one to which they do not receive treatment, or they receive treatment but it's in a placebo, and they will compare the results to the control group. Why do we need a control group? A control group is significant to give you something to compare to. So they are like the normal or sense of normacy in the experiment, whereas the experiment group is experiencing the experience itself, as in the medication or the scenario or the act or the ritual, or whatever you're trying to test. The experimental group will participate in, whereas the control group may not receive the medication. They may receive a sugar pill instead to have data to compare to. All right, when we talk about the placebo is a substance or treatment that has no effect, and it is always given to the control group. And that is because, let's say that we're doing a study and we are testing a new pharmaceutical drug that deals with attention. And you give half of the group the actual new pharmaceutical medicine, and then you give the other half a placebo. You do this in order for all of the people participating in the experiment to feel like they are equal. Something that can occur is the placebo effect, which is a phenomenon that occurs when some receive the placebo and they act as if they are receiving the real treatment, because remember that they are not aware that they are not receiving the true medicine. And then the types of studies that we occur with the experiment method is going to be the single blind study, where only the participants are unaware that they could be the controller experiment group. And then you have the double blind, which deals with researchers and participants are unaware of the group affiliation, which means that the scientists or researchers do not know who's receiving what, and neither do the participants. So the advisors over the experiment would know who is receiving what, and this eliminates bias. And that is going to be your methods of your research methods.